Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The heart monitor's erratic beeping was the only sound in the penthouse suite, louder than the thunder rattling the bulletproof glass, louder than the desperate, ragged breathing of the man who owned half the city but couldn't save his own son. Dominic Vance, the patriarch of the Vance family and an alpha whose mere presence could force lesser men to their knees, stood frozen. His knuckles were white as he gripped the railing of the hospital bed installed in his master bedroom. In the bed lay Leo, 5 years old, heir to a billion-dollar empire, and currently wasting away into a skeleton wrapped in silk pajamas. The boy hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 weeks. Every specialized chef, every Michelin-starred nutritionist, every Omega wet nurse brought in from the finest agencies had been rejected. Leo would scream, vomit, or simply turn his face to the wall, his small body rejecting the sustenance as if it were poison. Sir Dr. Heir spoke softly, his beta scent muted and clinical. His vitals are dropping again. The 4 fluids are barely keeping his organs functioning. It is psychological, a rejection of life. If he does not consume solid protein and bond with a caregiver within 48 hours, the alpha bloodline's aggressive metabolism will cannibalize his remaining muscle mass. He will die. Dominic turned. His eyes, usually a cold, piercing steel gray, were burning with a feral, red-rimmed desperation. I have fired 3 chefs today, Heiress. I have interviewed 50 Omegas. He hates them. He hates their scent. He smells their fear, and it makes him sick. He needs a connection, Dominic, Heiress insisted, dropping the honorifics in the face of death. Not a servant. An anchor. Get out, Dominic growled, the command vibrating in his chest, a low rumble that made the expensive crystal vases on the mantelpiece tremble. Leave me with him. As the doctor retreated, Dominic sank into the chair beside the bed. He took Leo's small, cold hand. The boy's skin was translucent, the veins showing blue and fragile. Dominic Vance was known as the Viper of Wall Street, a man who had destroyed rival companies before breakfast and dismantled families for profit. He was an apex predator. But here, in the dim light of the sterilized room, he was just a father watching his world turn to ash. He needed a miracle. He didn't believe in them, but he needed one. 17 floors below the executive penthouse, in the cavernous, stainless steel labyrinth of the Vance Corp employee cafeteria, the lights were dimmed. It was 10 p.m. The building was mostly empty, save for the security teams and the janitorial staff. And Julian Thorne sat on an overturned milk crate in the back of the pantry, hidden from the security cameras. He was tired, bone-tired. As a junior archivist in the basement records department, he spent his days inhaling dust and dodging the unwanted advances of middle management betas who thought a quiet, pretty employee was easy prey. They didn't know he was an Omega. They couldn't. Julian spent half his meager paycheck on black market suppressants, high-grade chemical blockers that masked his sweet, floral scent, turning it into something dull and beta-like. Being an Omega in the corporate world was a liability. Being an unbonded Omega with a mountain of inherited debt was a death sentence. His stomach grumbled, a painful twist. He hadn't eaten since yesterday. He opened the Tupperware container he had brought from home. It wasn't much. He couldn't afford high-quality synthesized meats. It was a rustic beef stew, made from cheap cuts he had slow-cooked for 12 hours until the collagen broke down into a rich, velvety broth, seasoned with rosemary he grew on his fire escape and a pinch of smoked paprika. He had heated it up in the industrial microwave. As he popped the lid, steam curled up, carrying a scent that was warm, earthy, and profoundly comforting. It smelled like safety. It smelled like a home he didn't have anymore. Julian lifted the plastic spoon, his hand shaking slightly. The cafeteria doors swung open with a violence that made Julian jump, nearly dropping his dinner. He froze. He expected a security guard, ready to scold him for loitering. Instead, the air in the room instantly grew heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Julian's arms stand up. It was the crushing pressure of a dominant alpha. The scent hit him first: ozone, crushed pine, and something metallic, like blood on snow. Dominic Vance stood in the doorway. He was not wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone, his dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the corded muscle of his neck. He looked deranged. His eyes were scanning the room, nostrils flaring. Julian stopped breathing. The CEO? The Viper? Why was he in the employee cafeteria at 10 at night? Dominic's head snapped toward the pantry. He moved with a terrifying, predatory grace, crossing the large room in strides that ate up the distance. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at the Tupperware. That smell, Dominic rasped, his voice rough and used to asking for things. What is it? Julian scrambled to stand, clutching the container to his chest like a shield. And Mr. Vance. I'm sorry, I'm leaving. I didn't mean to. The food, Dominic interrupted, stepping into the small pantry. The space was instantly too small. Julian was pressed against the wire shelving, the cold metal digging into his back. The Alpha was massive, towering over him, radiating heat and stress. Give it to me. Julian blinked, bewildered. My lunch. I will pay you, Dominic said, his eyes fixated on the brown stew. Name your price. 1,000. 10,000. Give it to me. Julian looked at the stew, then back at the frantic, terrifying man who controlled the city's economy. This wasn't a robbery, it was an act of desperation. He saw the tremor in the Alpha's hand. You can just have it, sir, Julian whispered, extending the plastic container. It's just beef stew. Cheap cuts. Dominic snatched the container. He didn't say thank you. He didn't ask Julian's name. He brought the container to his nose, inhaled deeply, and a shudder ran through his massive frame. For a second, the crushing weight of his pheromones lifted, replaced by a flicker of relief. Then, without a word, he turned and sprinted out of the cafeteria, leaving Julian standing in the dark, hungry and confused, holding a plastic spoon. Dominic didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs 2 at a time, protecting the cheap plastic container as if it held the cure for cancer. He burst into the penthouse bedroom. Dr. Eris looked up, startled. Wake him, Dominic ordered, marching to the bedside. Dominic, he's barely conscious. You can't just force. I said wake him. Dominic roared. Leo stirred at the commotion, his eyelids fluttering. He looked so small in the king-sized bed. Dominic sat down, opening the lid of the Tupperware. The scent wafted out, rosemary, rich fat, earth. Dominic watched his son's face. Usually, the smell of food made Leo gag. Leo's nose twitched. His eyes opened, dull, gray eyes that mirrored Dominic's own. He turned his head slowly. He didn't pull away. He looked at the container. Papa. The voice was a dry croak. It's okay, Leo, Dominic whispered, his voice trembling. He scooped a small amount of the broth and a piece of soft potato onto the plastic spoon. He brought it to the boy's lips. Just try? Please. For Papa. Leo hesitated. He sniffed the spoon. Then, miraculously, his mouth opened. He swallowed. Dominic held his breath. He waited for the retching, the rejection. More, Leo whispered. Dominic felt a tear track down his cheek, hot and foreign. He fed his son another bite. Then another. The boy ate with a slow, growing voracity, the color returning faintly to his cheeks. He ate half the container before he slumped back, exhausted but satiated for the first time in months. Who made it? Leo murmured, his eyes drooping. It smells like the dream. I'll find him, Dominic vowed, smoothing the hair back from his son's forehead. I promise. The next morning, Julian was summoned to the HR department on the 40th floor. He assumed he was being fired. He had spent the night tossing and turning, his empty stomach aching, terrified that he had offended the CEO with his cheap food. He wore his only good suit, a slightly frayed charcoal ensemble that was a size too big, and took an extra dose of suppressants, just in case. When he entered the office, it wasn't the HR director waiting for him. It was Dominic Vance. Dominic sat behind a desk made of black glass, looking like a king on a throne of ice. The city skyline sprawled behind him, insignificant compared to his presence. He looked composed today, the feral desperation gone, replaced by the cold, calculating demeanor that made him feared. Sit, Dominic commanded. Julian sat. He tried to make himself small. Your name is Julian Thorne. 24. Junior archivist. Salary, $38,000 a year. Outstanding debt, $150,000, inherited from your father's gambling addiction. You live in a studio apartment in the East District that has been cited for mold 3 times. Julian's face burned. Did I do something wrong, Mr. Vance? On the contrary, Dominic said, leaning forward, steepling his fingers. You saved my son's life last night. Julian blinked. The stew? The stew, Dominic confirmed. Leo ate it. All of it. He hasn't eaten in weeks. Doctors are calling it a breakthrough. I call it a necessity. He slid a thick document across the black glass. This is an employment contract. Julian reached out tentatively. For catering? No. For residence. Dominic's eyes locked onto Julian's, pinning him in place. You will move into Vance Manor immediately. You will prepare all of Leo's meals. You will oversee his nutritional recovery. You will be available 24 hours a day. Julian scanned the first page. The salary figure made his heart stop. It was more than he would make in 10 years. It would clear his debt in 6 months. I can't, Julian stammered. I'm not a professional chef. I'm an archivist. I have a life, You have debt, Dominic cut in ruthlessly. And you have creditors who are losing patience. I bought your debt this morning, Mr. Thorne. Julian went cold. You what? I own your debt. Which means I own you, effectively. Dominic stood up, walking around the desk. He stopped inches from Julian's chair. He smelled of expensive cologne and raw power. You can work it off in the archives for the next 40 years, living in squalor. Or you can come to my house, cook for my son, and be free in 1 year. This is blackmail, Julian whispered, looking up into the alpha's hard eyes. This is business, Dominic corrected. My son is dying. Your cooking is the only thing he accepts. I don't know why, and frankly, I don't care. I want results. Julian felt trapped. The walls of the office seemed to be closing in. He looked at the contract, then at the man who treated people like assets on a spreadsheet. He hated him. He hated the arrogance, the assumption that everything could be bought. But he thought of the little boy, the son who was apparently dying. Julian's omega instincts, buried deep under chemical suppressants, twitched with a phantom ache. A child in distress. 1 year, Julian said, his voice shaking but firm. And the dead is wiped clean. And I wanted in writing that there are no other duties. I am a chef, not a companion. Dominic's lip curled slightly, as if the idea was amusing. I have a harem of omegas throwing themselves at me daily, Mr. Thorne. I don't need a dusting archivist in my bed. I need you in the kitchen. Fine, Julian said, grabbing the pen. I'll sign. Vance Manor was not a home. It was a museum of cold marble and echoing hallways. It sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, isolated and wind-battered. Julian was given a suite in the East Wing, far from the master quarters but close to the nursery. The kitchen was a technological marvel, stocked with ingredients Julian had only seen in magazines. But the atmosphere was suffocating. The staff moved like ghosts, terrified of making a sound. The first week was a war of attrition. Leo was not the sweet child Julian expected. He was traumatized, angry, and distrustful. When Julian first entered the room with a tray of chicken congee, Leo threw a book at him. Get out, the boy screamed. You smell like fake flowers. You smell like lies. Julian flinched. The suppressants. They made his scent artificial. He set the tray down and sat on the floor, ignoring the chair. He made himself lower than the boy. I smell like fake flowers because I have to hide, Julian said softly. The world is scary for people like me too, Leo. Leo stopped screaming. He watched Julian with suspicious eyes. Why do you have to hide? Leo asked. Because big wolves like your dad might eat me, Julian joked weakly. Leo didn't laugh, but he didn't throw anything else. He crawled to the edge of the bed. The soup. It smells like the other night. It's better, Julian promised. I put ginger in it. It warms your tummy. Leo ate. Dominic watched from the doorway, hidden in the shadows, his arms crossed. He watched the way Julian spoke to the boy, not coddling him, but treating him with a gentle respect. He watched the way Leo leaned in, unconsciously seeking Julian's warmth despite the scent blockers. It irritated Dominic. It irritated him that this slender, defiant employee could do what he, the Alpha Prime, could not. He felt a stir of possessiveness, not romantic, but territorial. That was his son. That was his house. One evening, a month into the arrangement, a a storm battered the coast. The power flickered. Julian was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a late dinner. He was exhausted. The suppressants were taking a toll on his body. They caused headaches and nausea when taken so frequently. He paused, gripping the counter, a wave of dizziness hitting him. He didn't hear Dominic enter. "Dinner is late." Dominic's voice cut through the air. Julian spun around, knife in hand. "I'm sorry. I needed a moment." Dominic stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. He sniffed the air. Underneath the scent of onions and the chemical mask of the suppressants, there was something else. Something faint, sweet, and incredibly rare. "You're shaking," Dominic observed. He reached out, grabbing Julian's wrist. His grip was iron. "Let go," Julian gasped, trying to pull away. "Your pulse is racing. Are you sick?" "If you infect my son." "I'm not sick," Julian snapped, the stress breaking his filter. "It's the suppressants. They make me dizzy. But I have to take them, don't I? Because God forbid I smell like an omega in your precious, sterile house." Dominic froze. He pulled Julian's wrist closer, bringing it to his nose. Julian whimpered, terrified. This was an intimate, aggressive act. "Why do you take them here?" Dominic asked low, his voice vibrating against Julian's skin. "There are no other alphas here. Only me." "Exactly," Julian breathed. Dominic's eyes darkened. "You think I would force myself on you?" "I think you take what you want," Julian said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You bought my debt. You forced me here. Why would my body be any different?" Dominic released him as if burned. He stepped back, a look of genuine shock crossing his features, quickly masked by anger. "I am not a monster, Julian. I am a father. There is a difference." "Is there?" Julian challenged, rubbing his bruised wrist. For a moment, the tension was thick enough to choke on. The air crackled with the clash of their natures, the dominant alpha challenged by the defiant omega. "Stop taking them," Dominic ordered, turning his back. "The pills. They are poisoning you, and your shaking hands are a liability in the kitchen. No one will touch you here. You have my word as a Vance." "And what is that worth?" Julian asked quietly to the retreating back. Dominic paused at the door. "Everything." Julian stopped the pills. It took 3 days for them to leave his system. On the 4th day, the change was instantaneous. Julian woke up feeling lighter. The headache was gone. But as he walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, he noticed the change in the atmosphere. The guards at the end of the hall stiffened as he passed. The beta maids lowered their eyes, their cheeks flushing. His true scent was emerging. It wasn't the cloying, overly sweet scent of a typical omega. It was something complex, wild honey, sun-drenched linen, and a hint of spice. It was comforting, alluring, and dangerously potent. When he entered the nursery, Leo was sitting up in bed playing with blocks. The boy stopped. He inhaled deeply. A wide, genuine smile broke across his face, the first Julian had ever seen. "Julian," Leo chirped. "You smell like sunshine." Leo didn't just eat that day, he laughed. He played. The feral aggression vanished entirely. Julian's natural pheromones were a balm to the boy's high-strung alpha genetics. They soothed the biological imperative that had been screaming in the boy's blood. But the real test came at dinner. Dominic returned home late. He was exhausted, dealing with a merger that was falling apart. He was angry, his alpha aura sharp and jagged. He stormed into the dining room, ready to bark orders. He stopped dead. The dining room smelled intoxicating. It wasn't just the food. It was the air itself. It was thick, warm, and maddeningly inviting. It triggered a primal instinct in Dominic's hindbrain that he hadn't felt in years. Asterisk mate. Home. Mine. Asterisk. Julian was setting the table. He looked up, and for the first time, Dominic saw him clearly. Without the gray filter of the suppressants, Julian's skin seemed to glow. His eyes were brighter. Dominic gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles turning white. His control, usually absolute, was fraying. The beast inside him, the wolf that he kept chained behind suits and contracts, woke up and howled. "You stopped the pills," Dominic said, his voice a low growl. "You told me to," Julian replied, placing a tureen of soup on the table. He tried to keep his voice steady, but the sheer intensity of Dominic's gaze made his knees weak. The biological reaction was mutual. Julian's omega nature recognized the alpha in the room. His body wanted to submit, to bare his neck, to seek protection. His mind, however, rebelled. I didn't know, Dominic murmured, stepping closer. I didn't know you smelled like this. Like what? Julian asked, backing up until he hit the sideboard. Like the only thing that matters, Dominic whispered. He was too close now. He raised a hand, his fingers hovering inches from the scent gland on Julian's neck. Suddenly, the front door slammed open. Dominic, a shrill female voice echoed through the hall. The spell broke. Dominic stepped back, his face closing up like a steel trap. Julian let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, trembling. Into the dining room swept a woman in a red dress. She was beautiful, sharp, and smelled of expensive, synthetic rose perfume. Vanessa, Dominic said coldly. I revoked your security clearance. I'm still your fiancé until the press release says otherwise, Vanessa snapped. She looked at Julian, her eyes narrowing with instant, venomous recognition. She smelled the omega pheromones, potent and high quality. And who is this? The help? I am the chef, Julian said, straightening his spine. He is the reason my son is alive, Dominic corrected, his voice dangerous. Vanessa laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. Oh, please. Leo is sick because he's weak, like his mother. You think a servant with a pretty smell can fix a broken bloodline? She walked over to the table, looking at the food Julian had prepared. It's pathetic. You're letting a stray dog mark your territory, Dominic. She reached out and shoved the tureen. It happened in slow motion. The hot soup spilled across the table, dripping onto the floor. Leo appeared in the doorway, clutching his teddy bear. He saw the mess. He saw Vanessa. No, Leo screamed. Don't hurt him. Leo lunged. Not at Vanessa, but to Julian. He wrapped his arms around Julian's legs, burying his face in Julian's stomach, growling a tiny, high-pitched alpha growl at Vanessa. The room went silent. An alpha air-protecting an unrelated omega. It was unheard of. It implied a bond deeper than blood. It implied imprinting. Vanessa's face went pale. He imprinted on the servant. Dominic looked at his son, then at Julian. He saw the way Julian's hand instinctively went to Leo's head, protective and fierce. He saw the family tableau that he had never been able to create himself. A strange, dark realization settled over Dominic. The caretaker contract was no longer enough. If Leo had imprinted, Julian couldn't leave. Ever. But more than that, Dominic realized with a jolt of terror that his own beast was purring. He wasn't just angry at Vanessa for the mess. He was furious that she had threatened his pack. And Julian was now pack. Get out, Vanessa, Dominic said. It wasn't a shout. It was a sentence. If you ever step foot in this house again, I will dismantle your father's company brick by brick and leave you destitute. Vanessa fled. The threat was real, and she knew it. Dominic turned to Julian. The soup was dripping onto the expensive rug. The tension was back, but it had shifted. It wasn't predator and prey anymore. It was something heavier. Are you burned? Dominic asked. No, Julian said softly, stroking Leo's hair. I'm fine. Good. Dominic walked over. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of them. He reached out, and this time, he didn't hesitate. He placed his large hand over Julian's, which was resting on Leo's head. Skin to skin. The circuit closed. Clean this up, Dominic said to the empty room, though his eyes never left Julian's. Then come to my study. We need to renegotiate the contract. Renegotiate? Julian asked, breathless. Yes, Dominic's thumb brushed Julian's knuckles. The price has gone up. You aren't just a chef anymore, Julian. You're the heir's favorite. And I keep what is mine. As Dominic walked away, Julian felt a shiver that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the inevitable fall. He had saved the boy, but he had walked straight into the lion's den. And the lion was hungry. And that is how the viper decided to capture the bird that sang to his son. If you enjoyed seeing the cold CEO's defenses shatter the moment he caught the Omega's true scent, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive Dominic for his ruthless methods if it meant saving his child, or is he irredeemable? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,